He slipped and fell into the rapids, and his leg got stuck between two jagged rocks. Rescuers fought to free him, but it was wedged in hard, and in the icy water, his body started to shut down. They tried to keep him warm while attempting to lever the rocks apart, but after 20 hours, they still couldn't get him free. Finally, they pulled out a saw and amputated his leg. He was airlifted to a hospital and eventually recovered, and now plans to finish the rafting trip with only one leg. When you vape, the battery inside can short circuit. This creates intense heat within seconds. The chemicals inside start to vaporize, building pressure fast. And with no room to escape, it keeps rising until the battery bursts, shooting hot metal and flames straight into your face. It can burn your lips, shatter teeth, and leave permanent scars. She slipped into the race just half a mile from the finish line, blending in with the real runners as the crowd cheered around her. Then she sprinted across the line, arms raised, claiming victory in front of cameras. But other runners were immediately suspicious, since no one remembered running next to her. So officials checked every checkpoint and found that she was never listed. So they stripped her of the title. He hid the bomb inside a laptop and boarded the plane. You see, he planned to detonate the device once the plane reached 30,000 feet. The explosion would rip the cabin apart, killing everyone inside. He waited as the plane climbed higher and then went to set the bomb off. But they actually weren't high enough for the explosion to rip apart the plane like he planned. Instead, it just tore a hole near the emergency door and sucked him out into the sky. All of the passengers survived as the pilots turned back and landed safely. He was the only person that was killed. He put 12 cameras side by side, each connected to wires lining the track. As the horse ran past, it snapped the wires one by one and triggered each camera in order. These captured tiny slices of movement, each at 1/1000th of a second. You see, he wanted to prove that horses lift up all 4 feet at once when they run, and when the images were played together, the horses appeared to fly, with all hooves lifted for one brief moment. Soon, others began to experiment with this technology, paving the way for modern movies. The hatch was closed after the baby was put into the stroller, and a glass window let the parents see inside. As they walked, they would use a small hand pump to pull air through a filter, and only clean air would reach the chamber. You see, during World War II, people were afraid that mustard gas would be dropped on cities, so they made the stroller to make sure the gas was filtered out and their babies could breathe safely. They scraped through the wall, creating a tunnel. And they did this through the night to avoid the prison guards. At one point, one of them was caught, but he convinced them that he was just stealing food from the cellar. After months of tunneling, they finally surfaced 60 feet away, and over 100 men escaped through the narrow shaft. 2 drowned as they attempted to cross the river. Another 48 were recaptured, but 59 men made it across Union lines, finally reclaiming their freedom. If you put a plane into a catapult and launched it, you would only need to use the engine once it was in the air. And some people think this would save a ton of jet fuel. But for a commercial plane, the catapult would have to launch it at almost 200 miles per hour, causing the metal to rip right off. And even if you made it stronger, the force inside the cabin could seriously injure passengers. And you would need to use extra fuel just to power the catapult, meaning you wouldn't really be saving anything. Start with a triangle made of 4 pieces that fit together perfectly. But when you rearrange it, an empty spot suddenly appears. You see, when you first put it together, it looks like the pieces fit together with no extra space. But if you look closer, the smaller triangles inside have slightly different slopes, so they can't form a perfectly straight line. And this makes the longest side curve just a tiny bit. When rearranged, that tiny curve shifts, leaving tiny strips of empty space. And the area of these strips is exactly the size of the missing square, meaning it was never actually a triangle, just an optical illusion. He filmed himself rubbing meat on his butt and sticking cheese up his nose before putting them on sandwiches to serve at Domino's. They posted the videos online as a prank, but just hours later, the clips went viral, and it shocked everyone who saw it. Some viewers even tracked down the exact store location, and the two employees were quickly fired and arrested. Domino's even sent out a public apology, but the damage was done and their sales dropped by 50%. After she withdrew thousands of dollars from the bank, he followed her through the streets. And while she was walking, he grabbed her and threw her to the ground. Then he took what he thought was the cash and started to run away. But he realized he had taken the wrong bag, so he came back and slammed her even harder into the concrete. Her spine snapped, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. He took the money and ran, but was later caught and sentenced to 30 years in prison. If you plugged the top of an erupting volcano, would it prevent it from exploding? Well, magma and gas would still be rising from deep inside the earth, and with nowhere to escape, the pressure would build higher and higher until the rock around the magma chamber would start to crack, opening new eruption points miles away from the original volcano. But the pressure might cause it to explode sideways out of the volcano, causing the eruption to be even more destructive than normal. She dropped her diamond ring in the garden, accidentally burying it in the soil. She searched for hours but never found it. And years later, she planted carrot seeds in the same spot. Beneath the dirt, one tiny seed sprouted near the lost ring. And as it grew, it pushed through the ring's open center, slowly thickening and wrapping itself tightly around the band. When the plants were ready, the woman pulled the carrot from the ground, and she found her ring after 13 years. The cicadas spend most of their lives buried underground, sucking sap from tree roots. And year after year, billions stay hidden, growing slowly in the dark. Then, after 17 years, they all begin to crawl out. Billions emerge together, covering trees and fences and streets. And each female lays hundreds of eggs in tree branches. When the eggs hatch, the tiny babies drop to the ground and dig down into the soil, starting the entire cycle again. The real money was placed between the play money, and tiny metal compasses were disguised as playing pieces. Then, secret maps were pressed flat inside the board game. The games were boxed and placed into care packages and sent into prison camps. You see, the British military worked with a toy company, and together they hid these secret tools inside the boards, disguised as a simple game. Prisoners used the money to bribe guards, and once free from the camp, the map and compass helped guide them to freedom. He tried to carjack the van with 2 kids inside, but the 12-year-old started punching him and screaming for help. As he tried to steal the car, she pushed the gear stick into drive and held it there. And this safety feature made it impossible to start the engine. When the criminal realized this, he ran away. Police got him soon after, and the girl survived with only a fractured wrist, saving her sister and herself. As you walk on the tiles, the pressure creates mechanical movement that shifts a small generator inside the tile, which creates an electric charge. Wires inside capture this charge and send it to a battery where it's stored. Now, each footstep only produces 4 watts of power, not enough to charge anything. But if these tiles were installed in Times Square, they could create enough energy to power these billboards for a few seconds. He walked into the bank pretending to be a health inspector and demanded all the staff take a vaccine. They lined up and swallowed it, but moments later, they collapsed in extreme pain. You see, he had actually given them a deadly poison, and as it started to kill them, he grabbed cash from the vaults. 12 people died slowly and painfully, and all he walked away with was a few $100s. As you slice down, the blade can slip off the pit and shoot in your hand if you try to cut an avocado while holding it. If you stab the pit to twist it out, it can also slip, sending the knife into your fingers. Instead, place the avocado on a cutting board and slice around the pit. Then rotate the halves apart. Tap the pit with your knife blade and twist to lift it out. And if you clean the pit, wrap it in a damp paper towel and let it sit for a few weeks, it'll start to germinate. Then just put it in some soil and you now have an infinite avocado glitch. Fold the square in half, then unfold it to leave a crease. And do this 3 more times until you have 2 diagonal folds and 2 horizontal folds. Next, fold it into a square and bring the corners on both sides into the center line, making a kite shape. Crease the triangle at the bottom, then open the kite and fold in the edges on both sides. Fold each quarter into the center, then pull the 2 narrow sections down and fold them in place. Stand it upright and fold down the head, then fold the wings to form a crane. He had to glide down toward a highway because his engine had stalled. But as the landing gear lowered, it hooked onto the trunk of a car speeding below, and the plane and car moved together at highway speed. Once he noticed, the driver hit the brakes, stopping safely with the plane still perched on his trunk. Now, no one got hurt, but the pilot said he would never fly again. Stick your finger behind the eye and pop it right out of the tuna. Then boil it for a minute to remove dirt and bacteria. Throw them into a pot with broth, soy sauce, and ginger and let them simmer for about 15 minutes. As they're cooking, cover them with tin foil to keep them moist. The fat around them will melt into the pot, mixing with the other ingredients. And once they're done, you would suck the juice out of the eye as a delicacy. The cobra wrapped itself around the toddler's hands. Before anyone could react, he leaned down and bit its head. The snake died instantly, but the boy passed out on the ground. His parents rushed him to the hospital, afraid that he had been poisoned. But venom works best when it's injected through the snake's fangs. And since he bit the snake before it could bite him, he only suffered a little swelling and quickly recovered. His metal dog tag slipped out of his shirt while he was sleeping, and the chain dangled down and touched the exposed prongs of his phone charger. In an instant, electricity surged into the necklace, turning it into a burning hot wire. The current shot through his neck, chest, and hand, searing his skin, but he managed to tear the necklace off just in time, leaving him with nothing but severe burns. She jumped a fence into the polar bear enclosure right in the middle of feeding time. One of the bears bit her from behind as she swam. Rescuers finally pulled her out, but seconds later she slipped and fell straight back in. The bear attacked again before they managed to drag her to safety for good. She had deep bites covering her body but survived, and was later fined for trespassing. If you place a quarter on the table and roll another one all the way around it, you would expect the moving coin to spin just one rotation. But when it gets back to where it started, it's actually spun twice. You see, as the coin rolls, its edges has to touch every single part of the other quarter, and this makes it spin one full turn already. But the coin's middle is also going in a big circle around the other coin, and this extra trip makes the coin rotate one more time. So instead of one spin, the moving coin does 2. And this was so confusing that even the SAT books got it wrong, and they had to throw the question out. He pulled the bench out from under him and smashed it in half in front of everyone. You see, in medieval Italy, bankers worked from wooden benches called banca. And according to the legend, if they couldn't pay their debts, breaking the bench, known as rata, showed they were ruined and had no money. Together, bancarata meant broken bench, the symbol of financial ruin. Now, over time, the phrase was passed along to other countries, and eventually it was translated into English as bankrupt. If you instantly lost 300 pounds, surgeons could cut the loose skin along your torso and arms. Then they could stitch the extra folds together, joining them into wide wing-shaped flaps. The loose skin on your legs would also be cut on the inside, then stitched together. And once fully healed, the stretched skin would spread out like a suit. And if you jumped off a building, it could catch enough air to let you glide for just a few seconds. You would pack shoulder to shoulder in a giant circle, and the outer layer would face deadly cold winds, while the inner group would be warmed by body heat. But the layers of the circle would have to keep switching, slowly moving people from the outside into the center of the group. If a person spent too long on the outer layer, they would die from the cold, leaving the inside exposed to the wind. Now, penguins have layers of thick fat and feathers to keep them warm during this, but the human body isn't as good at keeping the cold out. So each person would need to constantly wiggle their feet and squeeze their calves to produce heat. Otherwise, everyone would freeze to death in hours. They shot the blowgun while she was playing, and the dart went up her nose. It shot deep in her skull and lodged in the bone, right next to a major artery. And if they pulled it out, she could have died. Instead, doctors put a tiny camera and drill up her nose. Over the next few hours, they drilled through bone, removing small pieces until the dart came loose and it was carefully pulled out. When you blow on a dandelion, each tiny white parachute is actually a seed. The wind carries them until they land, and a new dandelion grows, which is why you see them everywhere. When the yellow flowers lose their petals, the seed starts to grow until it becomes a white puffball, and the cycle begins again. Now, most people just see them as weeds, but you can actually use the flowers for salads. The leaves can be cooked like spinach, and if you bake the root and grind it up, it actually tastes a bit like coffee, meaning the whole thing is edible. He grabbed the stage and began to pull himself up. And when he climbed on top, the singer pushed him backwards. Now, the stage was 3 feet high with nothing to break the fall, so he crashed onto the floor, his head slamming hard on the concrete. The 19-year-old fan immediately went into a coma, and weeks later, he died. Now, 2 years after that, the band flew back to perform, but officers were waiting at the airport. They arrested the singer once they landed, and he was charged with manslaughter and forced to spend 5 weeks in prison. But in court, the blame shifted to security for failing to keep the fans away from the stage, and the singer was found not guilty. He sunk his teeth into the opponent's ear and ripped off a chunk. The man jumped, bleeding and screaming in pain, but a doctor let the match continue until Mike Tyson did it again, but this time he bit the other ear. Now, the fight kept going until the referee noticed the bite. Tyson was disqualified, fined $3 million, and banned from boxing for 15 months. If you tried to cook a chicken breast with a lightning strike, it would instantly char the outside while leaving the inside raw. Instead, set up a tall rod to catch the lightning strike, sending most of it safely into the ground. Then have a smaller part of the rod in a big tank of salty water. When the bolt strikes, the electricity would heat up the water, and that water is used to heat up the chicken. If the lightning keeps striking, the tank heats evenly, cooking all the way through the chicken. If you plopped every human on Earth onto one giant scale, it would read over 500 million tons. But what if you did this with all of the bugs on Earth? Well, you might think it would be about the same, but Earth is crawling with over 10 quintillion bugs, massively outnumbering humans in numbers and mass. Altogether, they would weigh over 1 billion tons, almost double the weight of every human on the planet. As the candle burns, the flame slowly melts the wax, inching closer to the clothespin. A metal bottle cap sits on top of a Q-tip, held in place by one leg of a paper clip. The other leg is angled downward, placed exactly where you want the candle to stop. As it gets shorter, the wax underneath melts away, causing the leg to fall. This tiny movement lets the bottle cap drop straight down onto the flame. When it lands, it blocks out all the oxygen, smothering the fire instantly. The crocodile lunged from the water and bit the man on his thigh. It dragged him down, ripping through his skin and muscle. But Steve Irwin jumped onto the crocodile's back, and the man managed to tear his leg out of his mouth. He began to climb out, and the crocodile followed, but Steve Irwin forced a stick in between its jaws, stopping it from biting and allowing both men to escape. His friend needed 187 stitches, but he survived and went back to work soon after. He was inspecting a grenade when the fuse suddenly ignited, but instead of running, he grabbed it and held it to his belly. He yelled at the other officers to look out, then ran for the door, still holding the bomb. You see, he was planning to throw it out of the building, but when he got there, he saw other soldiers standing outside. So he pressed the bomb tightly to his stomach, and when it went off, the shock was absorbed by his body, eventually killing him. Everyone else survived because of his sacrifice. If you wanted your house to bounce like a lowrider car, you would need to attach car-sized hydraulic cylinders underneath it, and they would have to pump thousands of liters in a single second just to lift the house once. But the floors and walls would split under the pressure, so you would also need steel plates and beams to support the house. And even then, the force would be so extreme that it would crack your chimneys while shattering every window. But you could wire the cylinders to your alarm clock for a seriously effective wake-up call. He was working on a shoe when his thumb got caught in the trimming machine, and in a split second, the blade had sliced through his thumb, dropping it to the ground. He was rushed to the hospital where surgeons amputated his big toe. Next, they connected the blood vessels, nerves, and tendons where his thumb used to be. After months of physical therapy, he could use his toe just like a regular thumb, allowing him to use his hand and get back to fixing shoes. He stepped onto the moon and dumped a handful of rocks into a bag, which was sent for testing back on Earth, but it got mixed up in storage and shipped to a museum where the owner illegally sold it. And years later, a woman bought it at an auction for $1,000. When she asked NASA to test it, they refused to give it back to her because they realized it was from the first moon landing. So she sued them and won it back, auctioning off the bag for millions of dollars and giving the money to charity. Start by rolling toilet paper across the gap. Then go back and do it 50 more times, and when you step onto it, you would still fall straight through. You see, a single sheet can only hold about the weight of a book, meaning more than 150 layers would have to be woven together just to hold your weight. And laid flat, the bridge would be about 20 sheets long and 8 sheets wide, just enough for one person to walk across, but only one at a time. The bacon is rolled into hollow tubes and baked until they're hard. Then they're bundled together and wrapped with more meat. After that, it's taped to an oxygen hose that releases a steady stream of air. You see, bacon is packed with fat, which stores energy. And when you light it and add oxygen, that fat turns into fuel, which feeds the intense flame, creating a jet of fire that can cut straight through metal. The ground beneath her feet began to cave in, and she plunged into a 9-foot-deep sinkhole filled with water. You see, there used to be an old well there decades ago, but over time, the ground had dissolved into a giant underground hole, which crumbled and trapped the woman for 20 minutes. Finally, her neighbors heard her cries and called the firefighters, who hauled her out with a rope, saving her life. She served beer as fast as she could, racing from table to table. You see, her manager promised that whoever sold the most beer would receive a brand new Toyota. And when she finally won, they blindfolded her and led her outside. But instead of a car, they handed her a box. And inside was a plastic Yoda figure from Star Wars. Her manager laughed, explaining that this was her brand new toy Yoda, meaning he had tricked her and never actually planned on giving away a car. She quit her job and took them to court, and the case settled, giving her enough money to buy a real car. He crashed his moped without a helmet, and his right side was left paralyzed, and his speech was slurred. So when he complained at a restaurant, the owner thought he was drunk. He called the police, who threw him in a cell overnight. Later, he tried to take a taxi, but again, the driver thought he had been drinking and called the cops. He spent a second night in jail before he could explain. Then he found himself close to a bar fight, and police tried to arrest him again, until they found an ID card explaining his brain injury, and they let him go. They pushed a tube into the squirrel's tunnel and pumped in flammable gas until the burrow was full. Then they lit a spark at the tunnel entrance. The gas ignited instantly, sending a shockwave racing underneath. Dirt and smoke burst from the ground as the explosion tore through the tunnel, and the force blasted the squirrel out of its burrow in seconds. The drone would fly toward the flower using tiny propellers, and its underside would be coated in horse hairs, which are covered in a liquid gel. As it lands, the sticky hairs grab pollen grains from the flower, and when it moves to the next, the pollen is dropped inside while picking up new grains. This pollinates the flowers, allowing them to create new fruit. But each robot has to be controlled by hand, and we would need tens of thousands just to pollinate a field of fruit trees, meaning real bees are still better. He throws his body backward when the ball is in the air and lifts his non-kicking leg first to gain height. At the peak of the motion, he snaps his kicking leg forward. He spreads his arms for balance, and his eyes stay locked on the ball until contact. And once he strikes, he lands on his arms and back to absorb the impact while the ball makes its way toward the goal. The plane goes straight up and releases the bomb before flying upside down and backwards. As it straightens up and flies away, it stays out of enemy range. At the same time, the bomb rises high into the sky, arcing toward the target. And when it reaches its highest point, it drops back down toward the target. By the time it hits, the aircraft is far enough away to avoid the blast. When you slice a watermelon in half and in half again, then cut it into wedges, the sticky juices cover your face as you eat. And since it doesn't fit your mouth, you actually lose some of the fruit. Instead, cut the watermelon in half on the short side and flip it over. Next, slice even strips in one direction, then again in the other direction, making a grid. When you pull out a piece, most of them will be the perfect size to fit in your mouth. He tossed the hard drive into the trash, thinking it was blank. But a few months later, he realized it was actually his key to 8,000 Bitcoin, which is worth over $800 million today. He begged the city council to let him dig up the landfill, but they refused, saying he could damage the surroundings. So he made a plan that used special drones and robot dogs, hiring a team of experts to carry it out. And he even tried to buy the whole landfill. But to this day, the hard drive is still buried somewhere under millions of pounds of trash. If you happen to get kidney stones, you could ride a roller coaster and let the shakes dislodge them from the tissue walls. Then, as the coaster moves, the change in speed shakes your whole body, and this makes them move into your bladder, where they can finally pass through when you pee. Now, not every ride is able to do this, but Disney's Big Thunder Mountain does this so well that some people go there just to get rid of their kidney stones. He climbs in through a zipper on the belly, slipping his feet into Snuffy's giant ones. With his hands, he controls the eyes and mouth while speaking in Snuffy's voice. And a bike handle attached to a PVC tube allows him to raise and lower the trunk. Behind him, a second puppeteer wears the back legs, and each movement is carefully rehearsed to ensure Snuffleupagus doesn't trip over himself. It swam straight towards her with a steel hook glinting inside, and instead of turning away, she reached in with her hand inches from its teeth and plucked the hook free. Now, on her next dive, another shark appeared with a hook, and then another swam up to her, all with hooks buried in their mouths. Now, they would thrash and swim away as she worked to free it, but they would keep coming back until it was gone. And over the years, she has removed more than 300 hooks. When an earthquake hits, the force travels into the steel and rubber tubes at the bottom of the building. These tubes absorb the shock of the earthquake and allow the building to sway gently while the ground shakes around it. Other options include packs of giant springs, or even metal plates that literally slide the skyscraper around. But without these, the force would travel up the building's frame, cracking the walls while bending the steel beams, and sending the skyscraper crumbling to the ground.
জানি আপনি স্টকের ব্যবসা করেন, সিন্ডিকেট কইরা
এর মধ্যে ওর প্রেমে পাগল হয়ে যাব। আচ্ছা তুই বল, এটা কি সম্ভব? কেন সম্ভব?
ভাই আপনার জেল খাটাইছে ভাই, আমার বুকটা ফাইটে গেছে, আমি 3 দিন ঘুমাইনি, কষ্ট, আমার বুকটা ফাইটে গেছে, আমি অনেক কষ্ট।
শ্বশুর আর তানিয়া আমার বউ, আমি যদি তগো এলাম তানিয়ার চেয়ে কম হইবে কেন? তুমি তানিয়ার চেয়ে বেশি সুন্দরী। আরে কিন্তু আমার আব্বাস সাহেব তোর আত্মীয় লাগে। এখন তুই যদি আমার শ্বশুর এলাকার ভাবি, বড় ভাবি, তোরা সবাই এগো ফ্যামিলির। তানিয়া, আমার তো মনে হয় তুমি 3 দিনের দিন
আল্লাহ জানে কি শুধু এটা।
এই রিকশা,
এই ঘটনা ইতিহাস হয়ে থাকবো যে সেলিম ভাই ভালো।
আরে জুলি গেছে বাইরে মনে কর পিক করতে, বুঝছো?
মিনিমাম 1700 লাইন কবিতা লাগবো। তুই 700 লিখবি।
ছিল এইতেছি।
আমি তোমার ভালোবাসতে পারলাম না। তুমি অনেক ভালো।
রিকোয়েস্ট করছে, এতবার বলছে, এতবার বলছে, তো বাধ্য হইছি।
ফাইন ভাই,
কিসের কষ্ট যাবে, কিসের গল্প ছাড়া পাবে, কিসের কষ্ট
না
বাচ্চা, এটা তো আর আমার একার ডিসিশন না। এখানে শুভ কি চাই, ওর ফিউচার পরিকল্পনা কি। লাভ ইউ, রেফার করেন।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, তুমি প্যারা নিও না, হয়ে যাবে।
জি জি অবশ্যই, ঠিক আছে, ফোন দিন। হ্যাঁ,
তুমি কয়েকটা জায়গায় ইন্টারভিউ দিছো, তারাও জিজ্ঞেস করছে যে তুমি কতটা ইন্টারেস্টেড। এখন এই নিস্তব্ধতা কার না ভালো লাগে?
অনেক প্যারা দিয়ে দিচ্ছি, সরি।
আরে প্যারা নাই, এখন ঠিকঠাক ঘুম ঠিকঠাক হচ্ছে।
ভালোবাসি তোমায় অন্তর।
আচ্ছা কথা বলো। আমি তো উত্তরে চলে আসছি জসীমউদ্দিনে।
গুড মর্নিং। এভরিথিং ইজ ফাইন।
আচ্ছা শোনো, আমি
শহরে কিন্তু দুইটা রূপ, রাতের এক রূপ, দিনের আর এক রূপ।
অবশ্য কিছু মানুষের কাছে এই নিস্তব্ধতার চাইতেও টাকার প্রয়োজন বেশি।
তোমার যদি কোনো সমস্যা না থাকে তাহলে কি আজকে সারা রাত আমরা একসাথে চল না বিয়ে করি?
মানে
জি আম্মা, আমরা ভালো আছি, সবকিছু ঠিকঠাক। আপনি আসলে খুশি হব।
বেঁধেছি ঘর হৃদয়ের জুড়ে
হ্যাঁ, বলছিলাম কি তুমি ভবিষ্যৎ কি চিন্তা ভাবনা করছো?
মানে আমি অনেকদিন ধরে ভাবতেছিলাম যে কথাটা তোমার সাথে শেয়ার করব।